Our show today, it is Monday, July 10th, 2017, and start of a brand new week. We've got a lot of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room dealing with all our many and varied technical gremlins who seem to be working overtime on us today here. So getting on into the news, a lot of things happening all over the place. We're going to start here. Apparently, there is a federal prosecutor named Preet Bharara who is out there saying it is time for indictments against Hillary Clinton over the email server and possibly espionage. And as you know, that's the question I have been asking all along since the story about the private email server first appeared. Going back to the Clintons' 1994 Chinagate scandal, it is reasonable to ask if Hillary Clinton was replaying that, selling U.S. secrets to foreign interests using her weak private email server to deliver the goods and her so-called charitable foundation to collect and launder the money. And the more and more people are looking into that charitable foundation, they're realizing it just was a slush fund. It was a piggy bank. It spent very little of its funds on charitable work, not enough to meet the legal definition of being a nonprofit charitable foundation, but enough to generate some press to say, hey, we're doing some really good things. But apparently Huma Abedin was being paid out of the Clinton Foundation funds, a $34,000 a night Caribbean holiday for Chelsea came out of the Clinton Foundation. Payoffs to silence Bill Clinton's sex accusers were coming out of the Clinton Foundation. It was basically a personal piggy bank. And the evidence there is very compelling, and yet, of course, the corporate media and the deep state are all about Donald Trump's relationship with Russia. And did you see how he smiled when he shook Putin's hands? He's obviously Putin's puppet, blah, 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 blah. So forth and so on. We know where the real crime is here. And I think the indictment should move forward because something that I predicted was going to happen is happening. Hillary Clinton is now trying to assume leadership of the Democratic Party heading into next year's midterm elections, and this is fabulous news for the GOP. But if Donald Trump does not bring charges against Hillary Clinton, she could be back in 2020. And they'll just double down on the election fraud to steal the presidency for her. And so Hillary Clinton needs to be arrested and go to jail. It's more than getting rid of a political enemy. We, the American people, we need to see somebody who is this obviously criminal go to prison for it. Or we will lose all trust and faith and confidence in the federal government as being a government as opposed to simply more organized crime, the narcocracy. But more important than that, we need to get that Election Integrity Commission moving and overhaul the entire election system. Put in something that is much harder to rig as opposed to our current system, which almost seems designed to facilitate the manipulation of elections and covering it up after it's all over, inside the hidden world of those electronic machines. So we need to let them go. Now, do you remember James Comey? He's out there, screaming about Donald Trump and obstruction of justice, and of course, he literally tried to force the naming of an independent counsel by leaking some of his personal memos in the hope the media would get them, and that would build pressure on Trump to say, we're going to go ahead with an independent prosecutor, or get Congress to go ahead with an independent prosecutor. Now it's turning out that a lot of those memos that Comey leaked out contained classified information. And by leaking those memos out, it shows Comey broke the FBI's rules and ignored the same security protocol and laws that he publicly criticized Hillary Clinton for in the waning days of the 2016 presidential election. And then he gave her a get-out-of-jail-free card, and so he's probably expecting he'll get the same. But we're starting to really see the deep swamp, the deep state, surfacing. It's everywhere. They're all corrupt. The ones who are still honest and incorruptible, you can count on the fingers of one hand, and that's even accounting for the fact that you may be very sloppy with a carving knife in your youth. And Trump has to regain the initiative. He's got to go on the offensive, both against the corrupted deep state and against a crooked election system, or he's going to be a one-term president. Now, remember what Donald Trump tweeted out over at the G20. Everybody who was there were all talking about the DNC's server and why CrowdStrike was relied on to be the sole source that Russia was hacking the DNC servers. And CrowdStrike has now withdrawn that analysis because their methodology in a similar case was exposed as deeply flawed, to be most generous on that. We're going to do a shout out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. But here's where it gets obvious something is going on. The FBI requested examination of the DNC servers 13 times, and they were always rebuffed. That's like you call the police and you say, my neighbor robbed my home. And the police say, well, let's go on in and look at the evidence. And no, you don't need to look at the evidence. I have this guy who's working for me who said it was my neighbor. Just take my word for it and go arrest him. That's how transparent all of this is. And the American people are waiting to see justice done on this. All right, we're going to take a phone call. Steve in California, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Steve, are you there?
Are you there? Yes, I'm here.
Okay.
Hello? I'm here. Hello?
Yes, you're on the air.
Okay, couldn't hear.
I didn't know I'm hearing myself in my feedback. Okay, there it is. It's gone. Okay, Steve, what's on your mind?
I didn't know if you caught what Bubble Boy Mark Rubio has been tweeting about it. Did you catch that today?
No, I didn't. What's Bubble Boy doing now?
Our beef is not with Russia or the Russia people. It's with Putin, and of course he still brought up the Russian collusion in our elections, and of course gassing the people. So we can't support that. But they're still riding that line, and Marco Rubio now is tweeting all these things, saying basically the same mainstream media lie of Russian collusion and gassing people, and of course he's just riding that lie. That mainstream media continues to do so. And again, any news agency that continues on this pathway of insisting that these things are all true without ever showing proof is just losing credibility. I'm looking forward to the day when mainstream media just totally collapses, because they deserve every bit they get.
I agree, and we're starting to see it happen. And, I mean, look at it from the government's point of view. They very well cannot get up and say, okay, you caught us. We've been lying to you about all this stuff all along, but trust us, we'll be truthful from now on. They're trapped by the total accumulation of their own mendacity over the decades, and they really are in a bit of a corner. And meanwhile, more and more people are getting their information from the independent media. They're going to their friends and families and saying, look, you've been lied to about all this stuff. You were lied to about Saddam's nuclear weapons. They're lying to you now about Russia. And remind them that Israel tinkers with our politics far more than Russia ever did, which is a point that Oliver Stone himself brought up and then was edited out. So, they're in a corner, and they can't think of anything to do other than what they've always done, even knowing that ultimately it's going to produce a bad outcome.
I agree. Hey, Michael, I do agree that if Trump does not change the election fraud, I mean, the thing was built with fraud in mind, the system itself.
Oh, yeah.
Has he taken any action and made any verbalizations that he is going to dismantle this thing and make it fair and square?
Well, I think officially what he's waiting for is for his commission on election integrity to come up with some hard information about last year's election. And apparently something like 14 states are still refusing to turn over their voter data. But again, I wish Donald Trump would get on the phone to Bev Harris over at blackboxvoting.org, because remember, she found on an open FTP server the source code to the Diebold GEMS software and demonstrated it had been set up to allow election fraud to happen and go undetected, go unprovable. And so that is a big thing. And the next commercial break, I'm going to go ahead and repost my article on how to have honest elections, because ever since I've put that out there, I've gotten emails and calls from other countries around the world saying, yeah, we got rid of our electronic machines and we do it more or less like that right now, and the elections are a lot more trustworthy. But the American election system...
She's talking about the fraction magic. I agree. Definitely it's got to change. If they do not change this, they will be successful in the fraud next time, no doubt about it.
Oh, yeah, they're just going to double down because they're still believing that nothing bad will ever happen to them. The American people are too cowed down, to ever stand up and go after them with tar and feathers. I think the reason that Hillary Clinton really lost it at Trump's victory was she was convinced the election fraud was going to hand it to her. And now we have these videos that are surfacing that are confirming not only were millions and millions of illegal immigrants registered to vote, they were actually being paid to vote for Hillary Clinton over first Bernie Sanders and then over Donald Trump. So they were trying to steal the election for Hillary. They just couldn't steal it enough because vote fraud cannot reverse a popular landslide, which is exactly what Donald Trump had. If you go back to the campaign videos and you look at, he was filling these sports venues and not everybody could get in. And Hillary was in these little bicycle shops and places like that where hardly anybody was showing up, and they'd put the campaign workers and the tech crew in front of the cameras to make it look like she had a crowd. It was obvious she did not have the popular vote. They were just going to steal it, and corporate media was going to convince you, oh, yes, it's absolutely the right thing. And because corporate media is itself neck deep in this whole election fraud problem, they're in a panic about it as well, which is why, like the Vaccine Safety Commission, they're not going to report on anything coming out of the Election Integrity Commission, other than the fact that states are saying you can't have the voting data, it's racist, it's a violation of privacy, which is really weird because most of those states will actually sell that voting data to political action committees and fundraisers and so forth.
Hey, thanks, Michael.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch over to Tom in Florida. Tom, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, good day to you, Michael, and bless you, man. Bless what you just said a minute ago about Israel is going to invading our government more, and the Russians. Look at AIPAC. Look at all that crap. And that's wonderful what you said, Michael, about that. Not too many hosts actually say that truth like that. But I want to say this. Michael. As far as what's going on with yesterday, this guy Gruber. Who's the guy they put in jail because he said he told people they can lose weight? And then you had this guy Gruber say, no, the whole thing was a lie about the Obamacare. He's the one that should be doing a 30-year sentence, though, Gruber and all these Democrats that were trying to lie to the American public who stole trillions of dollars from the health care. But then you got all this stuff with the election, like you're talking about Hillary. I mean, she should be in jail, this guy, Johnson Gruber. But I'll tell you one thing, Michael, that really perplexes me, that nobody ever talks about. You do once in a while. This Lois Lerner, if Donald Trump were just to go after Lois Lerner for what she did to the
Tea Party,
the Tea Party, that would be so explosive that would shake. Even the Democrats would be shaken at the core, because once Donald Trump goes after Lois Lerner, all the filth that she was doing to the Tea Party. If he just goes after her, just her, it's going to shake the core of Washington forever, because she should be put in jail for sure. But what happened, you got guys like Gruber lying about the health care, Obama, that Sortero. I mean, unbelievable what these people have gotten away with, and the trillions of dollars they're stealing. They put the one guy in jail for saying he's got $30 million for telling people they can lose weight if they went on his plan. And they put, I guess he's getting a 10-year sentence or something.
Yes.
But Trump, yeah, you know about that case. But here you got all these Democrats, and you got some rhinos that, I mean, they're complacent too. It's unbelievable how they're trying to take Trump down. The Communist News Network. And by the way, Michael, did you see what's going on in Venezuela?
Oh, yes.
They're literally rationing the toothpaste.
Yeah.
They're rationing toothpaste, and they want Bernie Sanders? Are you kidding me? Bernie Sanders is a bigger leftist than Hugo.
Hang on. Venezuela is a little more complicated than that. Venezuela has been the target of covert economic warfare by the United States going all the way back to Hugo Chavez. They want to wreck the place so they can put in a puppet government. It's a pattern they've repeated all over South America in past decades. They did it in Chile. and they're going to do it. Well, they're doing it all over the world right now. But there's more to Venezuela than the fact that it was under socialist leadership, because before the U.S. went after Hugo Chavez, Venezuela was a cool place to live. It had a very high standard of living, very low prices, because Hugo Chavez was taking the money coming from Venezuela's oil and he was spending it on the Venezuelan people. And that, of course, is something the money junkies can't stand. The idea of the people of a nation profiting from the nation's wealth. It sets a bad example for all the serfs in all those other feudal estates.
Oh, Michael, what would Bernie Sanders be doing? I mean, Bernie Sanders, him and his wife are under indictment right now. But if you have a guy like Bernie Sanders running the country, what would he do to the United States? He'd wreck it, too. He'd run this country right into the ground with his socialist, licky-kissy, touchy-feely ways.
Well, again, looking at all the politicians who've gotten away with very terrible things, I'm coming to the conclusion that the attack on Bernie Sanders is less about the fraud that is alleged to have happened and more about keeping Bernie Sanders on the sidelines next year and possibly in 2020. Because if Hillary is really seriously thinking of running again in 2020, Bernie could come on back and he almost spoiled it for her this time. She doesn't want him back.
Well, I think, Mike, what it's going to shake down in the 2020 election, it's going to have that Warner, what's her name, Elizabeth Warner. You're going to have her. They're even talking about putting this jerk, the Rock, the actor, in there. That dummy whose movies are all crap anyway. I mean, it's unbelievable, man.
Yeah. You mean
Trump's trying to save the country.
Dwayne the Rock Johnson?
What? Yeah, they're talking about him running for president. Give me a break.
He's actually a nice guy, but no, he's not competent to be president. But
come on, the guy he played for the University of Miami football. I got brain damage. Are you kidding me? Oh my God!
All right,
that'd be a joke. Look, but anyway, Michael, I just want to say this. I want to see Trump go after the people who are running the IRS, like the Lois Lerner. If he does that, you're going to see so much crap in the news. Even the liberal news networks won't be able to handle it. They'll be jumping out of buildings because once Trump actually says, we're going to really investigate all this crap, you're going to see unbelievable stuff that's never been reported in the media of the United States of America.
Well,
we'll
back when Nixon was approaching his resignation, there had been an initial draft of articles of impeachment, which included Nixon's using the IRS as a political tool against his enemies, which is illegal, and that was actually dropped from the final articles of impeachment because they dared not let the American people get the impression that the IRS was being selective, that it was in fact being used as a tool to crush down and financially destroy the enemies of the elites. And so I'm not expecting that we're actually going to see anything. Because, again, our government is running like a religion. It relies on the faith and belief of all the American people that they are the good guys to keep moving forward. Unfortunately, more and more Americans are quickly becoming heretics because we are being shown on a day-by-day basis just what kind of terrible people seek those high positions of power. Just like people who go to church are shocked when they find out that the clergy has been diddling the altar boys in the choir when nobody was looking. So we're all going through that bit of a psychic shock here. We're going to come out the other side and say, all right, I think it's time that we rethink our relationship with whether it's the church or the government. All right, Tom in Florida.
Well, Michael, one more thing. Michael, there's one more thing I want to say. I did see the report today. 72% illegals have stopped coming to the United States over the last 6 months. I kind of find that kind of interesting. But I say build the wall, and we'll see what happens when the chickens come home to roost in October when they go for the budget and see if they do actually fund the building of the wall. We'll see how many Republicans actually line up. And I guarantee if they don't, they're going to get crushed in the 2018 election.
Well, I don't really know.
That's why Donald Trump won the election mainly, Michael.
It was one of the reasons, along with getting out of the wars, getting the economy under control here. And to be very honest, if you simply enforce the existing Title VIII laws on illegal immigrants and those who shelter them, take away the financial incentive, you're not really going to need a wall, in my opinion. We got to take a break for commercials. Thank you for the phone call, Tom. We'll be back with another phone call after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're going to take another phone call. Mike in Alaska. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, greetings, Mike. I wanted to push back on the China narrative here. On other shows a lot, people will hear about how, like China and Russia, they are really providing a counterbalance to the U.S. empire, but a lot of people kind of project that they have a growing middle class or that they're up and coming.
Mm-hmm.
And having been in both places, I just like to point out that I almost wish that were true, because I mean, at least someone would be getting a good lifestyle and standard of living would be going up. I'm not against that. However, what's really going on is we're just kind of racing towards the bottom. A lot of these places, the wealth is all concentrated in certain cities. In China, that would be on their east coast, Shanghai, Beijing. They are. You look at skyline photos of them; they're wondrous. But that's not where 90% of China lives.
Yes,
and that's not how 90% of China lives.
Well, I mean, you could draw a similar contrast between the skyline of New York City versus, Appalachia, where the tallest building there is a still.
Right, but I would say that, like, my quality of life here in Alaska, where, the tallest building is 6 stories in my town and is abandoned. But anyway, my quality of life versus a New Yorker versus someone in Beijing versus someone in Inner Mongolia is much more dramatic of a change. And I think that's one thing that one thing that made America great, is that there is much more of a desire in Western countries to have a middle class at all. Another thing that people don't know is that in Asia, if there was a lot of wealth, they will try to keep that away from the greater masses.
Just like Wall Street does.
Now. Exactly, we see that happening now. But what I'm saying is that they never really have a concept of a middle class. They always assume that it'll be an oligarchy with a lot of money, and everyone else is just barely getting by. So we're going downhill, but we're kind of the only ones with this concept. And sometimes we project that concept on the guys who are on the other side of the wall, thinking, okay, they're, do you know what I'm saying? We're trying to kind of make them seem better when really, for example, in Eastern Europe,
let me give you another perspective. Quality of life is very subjective. And you may look at the Chinese people living away from the coastal cities and say, well, they don't have the large houses we have. They don't have the 2 cars and everything. But it all depends. If they are feeling happy and content, that's a good quality of life right there. If they're not worried about, where their next meal is coming from. I mean, there's a lot of people in New York who have tremendous wealth. They don't feel like they've got a good quality of life. There's too much stress. There's too much competition. It really is very subjective. I think if you want to have a hard measure for quality of life, you need to go back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And just start on that bottom, immediate survival, and you go on up through sense of physical security, sense of food security, until you finally reach the top, which is self-actualization. And I think that is as good a scale for quality of life, because you can be at the top of that Maslow pyramid, whether you have all kinds of material wealth or just enough to be comfortable. It's like I used to say about the money junkies myself. I'd like to be rich. I'd like to give my wife the lifestyle I'd like her to become accustomed to, but I don't need a mansion, and I don't need a $250,000 car, and I don't need a $100,000 watch on my wrist. That's for people who are very insecure about their wealth and their quality of life. I think most people would be very happy just with a degree of comfort and security, and that's all they're really going to want. And what's really spoiling the party for everybody are the money junkies who cannot feel that they're rich no matter how much they have, until they can look out the windows of their towers and see everybody else absolute dirt poor around them. And only then can they allow themselves to feel that they are wealthy, because it's not an absolute measure. It's a differential. Anyway, Mike, got to let you go. Got to take another break for commercials, and we'll be right back. And I'm getting a lot of emails about the comments made about China. And we must be cautious about drastic oversimplification. And remember that a lot of what we think we know about China, again, is coming to us from the same people who told us that humans are warming the planet and so forth. And offsetting that, of course, is the fact that my father came from Shanghai. was an MIT student. And so I have, on my father's side of the family, I have roots over in that part of the world. But a few years ago, I took Claire over to Cincinnati for the World Choir Games. This is like the top recital event for the very best amateur choirs from around the world. These are not professional music groups. These are church groups, college groups, and you have to audition to be allowed to attend. And Claire and I were just amazed at how many choirs had come from China and how good they were. And they were sharing us snaps about where they came from, and it doesn't look like they're living in squalor, and they're certainly not on the East Coast. So you really do have to be very, very careful, because especially as quality of life starts to decline in this country, it's inevitable the propagandists are going to say, well, yeah, things are rough, but trust us, it would be a lot worse if you tried to move somewhere else. It's always been the case. Back during the 1950s, they were running down the Soviet Union. Yeah, things are rough in the United States, but it would be worse anywhere else. And then finally, as part of my career in film, I got to actually travel around a lot of the world. And I saw for myself that much of what I thought I knew about the rest of the world was a carefully crafted illusion. So we should be living in an age of skepticism and doubt about what we're being told conditions are like in other countries. Now, obviously, some countries are in trouble. Venezuela, it was engineered to be that way. But this idea that, the standard of living and the quality of life is so much worse in these other places, you don't want to leave. You know, it's always best to go find out for yourself here. Apparently, Kellyanne Conway had an interesting comment to Chris Cuomo earlier today, saying, aren't you embarrassed that you talk about Russia more than America? And that's a very cogent comment, and it would also apply to most of the Hillaryites, the corporate media, the Democrats, who seem to have forgotten their job is in this nation, not obsessing about this still without any proof at all connection between Trump and Russia, while studiously ignoring the fact that, as Oliver Stone said, Israel tinkers with our internal politics all the time to a very, very high degree. Nobody makes a big stink about that. So let's start looking at the war zones. And I've been watching the interactive map over time, and I did a before and after comparison separated by a few weeks about a week and a half ago. And the trend is continuing. The ISIS territory in Syria and Iraq is shrinking. It is only a matter of time until this war is over. And obviously the United States does not want that to happen, because then they miss their opportunity to still somehow find a way to get rid of Bashar al-Assad. And according to this report out of aa.com.tr, the U.S. has sent 184 trucks carrying military equipment to the PKK-PYD terrorist group in the northern Syrian province of al-Hasaka over the past week. And according to another source, another 102 trucks arrived 4 days later. So the U.S. is still arming the so-called moderates, and yet the weapons somehow wind up in the hands of ISIS and al-Qaeda. And there's another very revealing article over here from 21st Century Wire, Air NATO, and that's a reference to the old Air America of Vietnam days, where they've actually identified the commercial airline that is ferrying these weapons and supplies into the hands of these terror groups operating inside Syria. All right, we're going to take some more phone calls. Don in Iowa, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Mike. Yeah, you were talking about last week you were talking about the earthquake swarms in Yellowstone where they might have a supervolcano. And, but nobody's ever mentioned, maybe, does the fracking have something to do with that? I know it's a thing that happens once every once every 20,000 years or whatever. But right now is the first time they've had fracking, and there's fracking pretty close to. In fact, all over the state of Wyoming, there's fracking. And,
well, that would be a very dangerous thing to be doing on top of a supervolcano. I mean, nobody doubts that there's a supervolcano down there. Any volcanologist or geologist looking over the terrain extending from the current Yellowstone Lake to the southwest, you can see the remains of earlier calderas where there have been repeat blowouts of this supervolcano. Now, I didn't actually take a close look to see how close the fracking fields were to where this swarm of earthquakes is happening, which is actually to the northwest of Lake Yellowstone. But obviously, that would be something worth doing in Google Earth. Because if they are fracking there, and that is the reason why we're starting to see these quakes, they could literally blow the top off that mountain if they're not careful.
I'm not saying they're doing it right on top of there, but they're doing. I mean, this fracking. I don't know how you feel about it. You have a scientific background, but there is fracking. They never used to have earthquakes in Oklahoma.
That's true.
But now they have a lot of earthquakes in Oklahoma. You know?
Well, despite the propaganda and political pressure coming from the oil companies, I mean, more and more scientists, and there have even now been a couple of court cases that are settling for properties that are damaged by the quakes, which are now understood to be caused by the fracking. And worse, the fracking is pumping these highly toxic, carcinogenic, radioactive fluids down into the ground. They do not stay there. And, of course, the methane that is being released by all the fracking is what's killing all these fish in the ponds and lakes and streams by absorbing all the available oxygen. So it's hideously destructive of the environment, and it's not even really producing the volume of oil and gas everybody thought it was going to.
You think it is causing earthquakes in Oklahoma? It causes earthquakes? That's what everybody believes.
Well,
who lives around.
Yeah, there is a strong correlation there. And there's also a precedent because out in California, this is going back 25 years, at the 29 Palms Marine Base, they decided to get rid of some wastewater that couldn't be cleaned up by pumping it into an earthquake fault that just happened to be handy. And they started pumping the water down there, and all of a sudden they started getting these swarms and swarms of microquakes. Yeah, you're pumping a liquid down into a crack under pressure. It's going to force the crack open. And so they stopped the pumping, and the quake swarm went away. So, yeah, it's been demonstrated before. Pumping liquids into fault structures, or creating a fault structure, which is basically what fracking is trying to do, and then pumping more fluid into it. Yes, you will get earthquakes. And as you correctly point out, Oklahoma, prior to the fracking boom, hadn't had an earthquake since the New Madrid fault quake.
Right. Well, I'm looking at this map of fracking areas in America. Yeah, the whole state of Wyoming, on into Utah, down into Colorado, and on up to Montana, all around there. In fact, totally surrounding Yellowstone. Maybe not right on top of Yellowstone, but nevertheless, they're having. That's where the fracking is, right there.
Well, you know, they're still trying to map out the exact shape of the magma chamber under Yellowstone, but they have established that it actually does veer off underground toward the west. So if they're fracking on top of that, you could see a new vent open. There's no rule that says that when Yellowstone blows, it has to blow at Yellowstone Lake. And again, if you look at all those ancient caldera stretching off to the southwest, you'll see that most times Yellowstone, when it goes, it blows in a whole new location.
Yellowstone. From what I've read about that, I heard the word. It could be an extinction event. In other words, the whole human race could be extinct. It could be that extreme.
Yeah, well,
and especially North America. North America is doomed.
Yeah, North America would be gone. Much of Canada would be gone. It all depends on how big the explosion is, and nobody can predict that. But it would certainly be on the order of 100 times what we saw with, for example, Mount St. Helens. And there are other supervolcanoes. There's
somebody should know if the fracking is actually contributing to the possibility of this the extinction of the human race. I mean, come on.
I'm in agreement, and I'm on your side. I think fracking was a bad idea. I think it should be stopped. It's not actually producing any volume of usable oil and gas. It's actually an act of desperation to try and suck the last little bit of easily reachable oil and gas out of the ground, just to keep the oil companies into profits. And I think we are at that stage in human evolution where we do need to be seriously thinking about evolving away from the oil-based economy onto something that is going to be a little bit more future-oriented. Whether that's going to be fusion power, cold fusion, hot fusion, increasing the efficiency of solar, we don't know. But now's the time to start getting ready for it. There's a wonderful science fiction book called The Ring World by a guy named Larry Niven. And it's this adventure story on this amazing artificial artifact. But the backstory behind it is that the Ringworld civilization collapsed because a key part of their technology failed and was no longer available. A microbe evolved that ate a key material that was central to their power production, and the elites, rather than take what remained of their stored energy to try and develop something new, simply kept it all for themselves and threw themselves parties in their floating palaces until the palaces crashed to the ground. And there's a real lesson there, because short-sighted thinking can take a disaster and turn it into an absolute calamity. And it alarms me that within the bowels of power of both Wall Street and Washington, D.C., there are not very many people thinking more than 5 or 10 years into the future. And those people in academia who are...
Water is also scarce. Water is a scarce resource.
It was, but I recall reading recently about this student who had actually come out with a very novel approach to desalinization that seemed to be working. And what basically it was, instead of trying to filter the salt out of the water, he simply found a way to extract the water that wasn't mixed with the salt. And I know that sounds kind of archaic, but it basically meant that about 1/3 of the water would hold all the salt. That would just get tossed back in the ocean. And again, why not have the equivalent of a Manhattan Project to produce large-scale, cheap desalinization rather than waging wars on each other for the available fresh water?
To switch the subject, you were talking about Hillary, and we thought Trump was going to be tough. Trump is not tough at all. I mean,
no, I'm afraid he isn't.
In Sessions, everybody thought Sessions would go after somebody. What is he doing? He's not doing anything.
I don't know. I was getting ready to send Trump my Conan the Barbarian sword, but something tells me he wouldn't use it, so it's going to stay on the wall.
Trump, he'll get on the Twitter, and that's when that's childish, though. I mean, he's the president of the United States. He could actually do something. He has the power.
Yeah, I agree. If he wants people to respect the presidency, he does have to become a little more presidential. And
he made the statement that Comey is doing stuff illegal. That was his Twitter comment. Well, wait a minute. Now you're president. Doesn't he have control of the Department of Justice?
Actually, technically, no. I mean, the president can request that the Attorney General look into something, and the Attorney General then in turn requests the FBI. But generally, the president can't just say, go out and arrest that person. There is a process that has to be gone through.
He could have him look into it.
But I would
have Comey
he should. He should. Comey has already admitted he did it. He leaked these memos to the media containing classified information. That's a Title 18 violation.
I don't know. It's hard to read Trump's mind. Of course, it's hard to read anybody's mind, but he's just he's looking more and more like just a phony, big phony.
Well, I think he's still trying to be everybody's friend, and you can't do that in politics. And I would think after all of his years in business, he would understand that. You can either be the boss and a manager, or you can be the friends of the employees. You can't really be both, although supposedly his employees all love him. But especially in Washington, he's got to be presidential. He's got to learn how to command the respect of those people who currently do not respect him, and he's got to regain the initiative. And sometimes I wonder if that's really Donald Trump on that Twitter feed anyway, because what's on Twitter very often contradicts what Trump is actually saying in his public speeches. So I would not be at all surprised if they have somebody in the White House media office actually managing the Twitter feed, and every once in a while they make a goof.
I think he is. I think he's on that. I mean,
well, I think
that's his. I'm just guessing. You're right. I don't know. Who knows? Who knows what's going on?
Well,
I mean, he doesn't. Does he write his own speeches? He doesn't write his own speeches. I think he's more honest on his Twitter than he is on the speeches. But
well, it may be. I mean, Trump may still be feeling that he does not have a secure, reliable communication line between himself and the American people other than social media. Certainly, that was the way it worked during the campaign. Social media worked for him. That got past that chorus line of the corporate media going, "Give me an H, give me an I, give me an L," and and did succeed in basically blowing apart that wall of propaganda against Donald Trump. And maybe it's just hard for him to give that up, even though he doesn't really need it as much anymore.
Well, he had to kind of give in to the Republican establishment. Otherwise, he never would have made it out of Cleveland with the nomination. He had to kind of try to make friends with those guys for a while, but he doesn't have to anymore. He's president now. I mean, now he can. That's out the window now. He can go ahead and arrest Hillary. He can arrest. I mean, he should do something. He should get tough.
I agree. I agree. And the longer time goes on, I mean, we've got Hillary, who should be in prison, is out there already talking about assuming the leadership of the Democratic Party for the next two elections, if not actually run as a candidate in 2020. And that's an insult to ordinary Americans who are still trying to cling to this fond memory of a just and fair
he's
society.
Afraid a little bit. He knows that when he's working with, he works with, he had to deal with the mafia before he got through that without getting killed. He's trying to get through this.
Okay, I got to let you go. We got to take a break for commercials. Thank you for the phone call. We'll be right back. And aloha, welcome back to our show. And before we take more phone calls, I want to do a couple of stories. People are still trying to figure out exactly what went down on the G20 in the meeting between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin. And one clue could be found in Putin's comments to Secretary of State Rex Tillerson, because Tillerson was out there talking about America's plans for Syria, and Putin simply put him in his place and said, you have no rights to talk about Syria's future, because the future of Syria lies in the hands of the Syrian people and not the United States Secretary of State. And there really wasn't a way to come back from that. And this may have been one of the reasons why Donald Trump said maybe we should work more constructively with Russia, focus on actually getting ISIS and Al-Qaeda. And as a matter of fact, as of the last report, the UN observers are saying the ceasefire that they declared in part of Syria seems to be holding right now. Meanwhile, John McCain is out there flapping his gums again and screaming, we can't cooperate with Russia on and how dare Trump and Tillerson suggest Russia could have the right approach in Syria because they're the bad guys and Assad is gassing his own people and we stand for democracy and goodness and light and we just need to go on in there and take Syria because it rightfully belongs to us, blah, 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 blah. Boy, I think if we're going to investigate election fraud, we ought to start looking at some of those recent Arizona elections, because I get a lot of emails from people in Arizona saying, I don't know how that man gets reelected time after time after time because nobody I know ever votes for him. But he's out there just trying to keep the violence going, keep the war going. And John, here's your rifle and here's your parachute. Go have fun. But your job is actually the people of Arizona, not what is going on in Syria. I think the people of Arizona deserve more of your attention than Syria, or for that matter, Israel. Meanwhile, Beijing is poised to step in when whatever's going on in Syria, however it resolves, Beijing is set to step in and help rebuild Syria. Now, this is not just China being generous. This is China opening up Syria for economic opportunity, which is what the United States wanted to do if they could replace Bashar al-Assad. So it's a very clever move by China. They're sending a message to the United States saying, even if Assad leaves, you're not getting Syria. I think Russia and China are moving together to basically block further U.S. expansionism, and they basically just put up a brick wall in Syria and said, this is as far as you come, and we're not going to let you go any further than that. Now, over in Iraq, Mosul has now been liberated from ISIS control. This According to their Prime Minister, Haider al-Abadi. And he's basically declaring victory in Mosul. There's the music. We got to do a station break here, station identification. We'll be back with some phone calls after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2. We're going to take some phone calls now. David in San Francisco, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Oh, hey, Michael. Yeah, a lot of good topics there. That Syria thing is very tempting to talk about, but you had a great caller just before the top of the hour asking a lot of questions about fracking and Yellowstone.
Yes.
And if you think about it, if you ever been in Yellowstone itself, that volcano is so big, it's 35 miles across.
Yeah.
The crater. Yeah. And so it's not like, Mount St. Helens is probably a half mile across or a quarter mile across or something. But to have a 35-mile across volcano, they said that thing was so big it blew chunks to Santa Barbara and Texas. So when it went off, and I don't think it was 20,000 years ago, it might have been more like 150,000 years ago. I mean, somehow or another, it's not every 20,000 years, luckily enough, because that's a monster of an earthquake or a volcano. But the idea of fracking around it, if you had, before the white man got here, Montana was probably covered with native grasses that were like 12 feet tall, and they would keep the land cool. It's not like baking sun down on hard-packed soil. Since we've had cattle up there for 100 years or more, that the cattle have eaten everything down to a nub, and it's somewhere in between desert and scrub.
Yes.
And so that makes it a lot hotter up there. But if you want to try to keep a 35-mile across volcano cool, you better go out a couple of 100 miles to keep all of that surrounding land an ambient temperature.
Well, let's, okay, I think you've got a problem with your scale of thermodynamics, because what's happening to the magma chamber underneath Yellowstone, the impact of the surface temperature is going to be microscopic. Now, I was actually looking at a map of fracking wells, and they do have some in Wyoming, but they aren't that close to Yellowstone itself. Maybe somebody's having some common sense. Now, Yellowstone is known to have had 3 major eruptions. The first one was 2.1 million years ago. The second one was 1.2 million years ago. The last one was 640,000 years ago. And the largest of those was 6,000 times the size of Mount St. Helens. And the smallest was only 700 times the size of Mount St. Helens. So we're seeing actually a pretty regular periodicity, and I can understand why people are saying we may be coming up on a new super eruption in Yellowstone sooner than anybody cares to think about. And I understand there's another super volcano over in the Mediterranean off the coast of Naples that is showing signs of coming back to life, and that's making the Italians very nervous.
Sure, yeah, and the other thing about it, the fracking specifically, if you remember, like when Richard Nixon created the EPA and all of the polluters of the world were all of a sudden supposed to register all of their hazardous wastes, they were supposed to sell it to an official broker who would know how to deal with such hazardous waste and put it away cleanly. Well, it turned out that organized crime ended up handling most of the hazardous waste distribution.
Yes.
And now they're taking these weird chemicals, selling them to the fracking companies, and if you've got a geological formation, like southern Missouri's got a lot of limestone, but they might have a lot of granite up in New Hampshire, and they got, all the different sections of the world with different kinds of stone. They basically inject a certain chemical into a certain geological type, and it'll melt that rock and turn it into a gas that they then capture and burn. So they're basically
that's not exactly what's going on. The chemicals are sent down the well under high pressure to crack the rock to release already trapped oil and gas, which is then pumped back on out. The problem is the fracking fluids are not staying at the bottom of the wells.
Sure, but when you say crack the rock, it's the same thing. They just inject, like steam treat hazardous wastes, and they send it in so hot that it'll get in every crack, so it'll melt that rock. And it's still basically melting rock to turn it into a gas. And whether they melt it by sheer heat or they melt it chemically, it's still turning it into a gas, which then makes the stability of the whole area, it becomes slippery down there, so to speak.
Yeah,
and
yes,
so then you end up with more earthquakes. Yeah,
it's almost a liquefaction problem, only with these chemicals instead of water.
Sure, yeah. So that whole, I'd certainly be worried about that baby blowing off Yellowstone. But what's even creepier, if you remember, Rex Tillerson's in a deal with Putin to basically frack the North Pole. Now, if you remember, we got a magnetic north up there, right? What if they get anywhere close to the structure of magnetic north up there and start screwing with the magnetism of the entire planet?
Well,
I mean, how stupid can these boys be?
First of all, you need to look on a globe, because the magnetic North Pole is actually quite distant away from the geographic North Pole. And what causes Earth's magnetic field is that some portion of the inner mantle is actually in rotation relative to the rest of the planet. That's the dynamo that produces our magnetic field. And analyzing magnetic rocks throughout history have shown that the magnetic pole does wander around a lot, that it does occasionally strengthen. At the moment, it's actually starting to weaken, and every once in a while, it'll actually flip.
Oh, I know. Yeah, it's supposed to be a certain amount of thousands of years, but we don't want to induce it. Let's say,
I don't think you can. I don't think you can. With fracking at the North Pole.
Don't underestimate. Pollution is pretty effective. I mean, what they're doing
I'm
now
giving you my best.
Sheep.
I'm giving you my best analysis. If they frack at the North Pole, I don't think it's going to have any impact on Earth's magnetic field whatsoever. Anyway, listen, I need to let you go, and we got lines are loaded up here. We're going to go to Terry in Oregon. Aloha, Terry. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, after they get finished with Arizona on the voter fraud, they need to go right to South Carolina and check that state.
Absolutely. They need to check all 50 states.
Well, especially those two.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think they need to check California for just how many illegal immigrants actually voted.
Absolutely. Also, I wanted to say that I tuned in a little bit late. Did you have any comment on Ryan Dawson's post last Friday?
No, we hadn't, so feel free to bring us up to date.
Okay, he's posting, Mike Rivero has gone full retard on North Korea, combined with him saying Sandy Hook was fake, Fukushima radiation is going to get you, blaming the Iraq war on petrodollars, and blaming the JFK assassination on executive order. I think he has been compromised or just lost.
Maybe he just disagrees with me. Okay?
At least.
Let's go for Occam's razor here. All right, Terry, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go here, and we're going to do a shout-out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network. Then we'll go back to the telephones with Francis in North Carolina. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, aloha to you, Michael.
Aloha nui.
And the same to Claire. In light of your commentary about Trump and the tweeting and all that kind of good stuff, I have a quick question for you, and this is out of very bad humor. Just to prepare yourself for it.
Okay, I'm prepared.
I presume that Claire has a thermometer.
Yes.
Good, because she needs to take your temperature and make sure you're feeling all right.
Why?
When you made the comment that there was some question about whether or not he actually made a certain comment on the tweeting and all that stuff, it's like, are you serious? Are you actually questioning that? And so I thought I had to give you a buzz and throw you a bone on that one because it was too good to pass by. So you need to check your temperature with the thermometer and make sure you're feeling all right.
Okay, well, in my own defense here, the comment was made in the context that very often what is coming out of Trump's Twitter feed is contradicted by statements that Trump is making in front of a microphone or in front of a podium.
Yeah.
And a good example would be where he announced this cybersecurity cooperation with Russia at the G20, and then all of a sudden on his Twitter feed he's saying it's probably not really going to happen anyway. That is politically damaging to say. It makes Putin look like a fool. I have to wonder about that one.
Well, as much as I have to concur with your comments just now, as I may have said once before, who really believes that any comments that are made on the tweeting thing is really going to be legitimate to start with? As a point of reference, whenever Obama, Rivero, whatever name was given at the time, had the BlackBerry, Blueberry, whatever it was, and made a comment to the public individual that they could send him a note or communicate with him via that means, who in the world is going to end up being able to send someone like him a note like that without having to go through who knows what, logistically in the Secret Service or who knows what alphabet soup agency to pass him a note? So that just led into the very bad sense of humor there. So.
Well, like I said, there may be somebody in the White House press office who has been delegated the task of keeping the Twitter feed alive, and Trump may still post to it, but he can't post to the volume that he used to because he's kind of a little busy these days. So I'm thinking that some of the tweets are probably Donald Trump, but some of the fill may be coming from other sources as well. So we don't know. It's just I did observe that there was this very obvious dichotomy that was potentially politically damaging to both Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin on Donald Trump's Twitter feed. Anyway, Francis, we're going to let you go here. Thank you. And we're going to switch to Keith in Montana. Keith, welcome back to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, I got one more, Phil. But, in Syria, the so-called ceasefire there, Lieberman in Israel said that doesn't apply to them on Twitter this morning. So, anyway, as far as Yellowstone, living here in Montana, the only negative impact...
I'm sorry to cut you off, Peter, because I'm backing up here, and I'm recalling that in the original announcement of the ceasefire, it said that Israel and Jordan were part of this deal. So all of a sudden Israel is saying, no, we're not, and we can start shooting Syrians again?
Well, it was Lieberman, so I just noticed. I didn't forward it to you like that, but I just thought how disgusting, that they broke for this ceasefire. Then Lieberman makes a statement that that didn't apply to them, and I think it was specifically for the Golden Heights area.
Israel definitely wants that one. Absolutely. Okay, anything else?
Yeah, and as far as Montana, living here with Yellowstone and this recent quake here a few miles from the house here, the only negative impact I see from that is that millions and millions of innocent dogs could die. A few humans, too, but just, those poor dogs.
Well, I wish I were allowed to have a dog here, but I'm not. The Homeowners Association won't let me. Okay, all right, thanks a lot, Keith. We're going to switch to Sherry in Texas. Aloha, Sherry. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
What's on my mind, it has to do with ownership, competition, running people out of business. I think globalism has come to our town, Mike, and I'm really concerned about this. Our Fredericksburg Standard radio post. This is fredericksburgstandard.com. Mm-hmm. That's BURG, the Fredericksburg in Texas, standard.com. Front page came out Wednesday. Property taxes rankle merchants. Here's what's happening here. The lead is we can't pay our bills based on market values. For the first time, we're seeing going out of business signs on Main. Now, this is a place where people come from all over to shop for Christmas and Thanksgiving. I mean, it's packed. We have a lot of special events for tourists. It's a tourist industry. It's a soft industry. And it's like Carmel, California kind of. It just
Yes.
gets packed full of tourists. And this guy named John, he met with some others. They're very concerned. They met with State Representative Kyle Biederman to talk potential solutions to this rising tax bill. Now, John took renovated a building. You get good funding if you renovate something, and so he renovated. He had a really good business going, and the tax bill rose from $5,600 for the year to more than $49,000 in a span of 3 years. So in 3 years, it's like it went tenfold. And what's happening, wait till, I'm not going to mention names, but I'll tell you who I was told is buying up these businesses. This is on Main Street. Texas has this state's market value based on the market value-based taxing structure. That's what they need to change. And he says, when I say this is a government takeover of our business, I'm not being dogmatic. Now, there's a prominent, I was told, can't validate it, but I'm just going to pass it on. There's a prominent New York newspaper tycoon's family that moved here.
Oh, okay.
And, okay. And they're buying up the businesses on Main Street. And I feel really creepy about this because it's like, no, not here. We were always supposed to have the best mom and pops in the country, you know. We were known for that. This is ours. This is our citizens. Well, these people are citizens now, but no one has the money they have. I mean, I could go on, but I don't want to run them down. I want to be, you know, neighborly enough to not be mentioning who they are, but my gosh, what can they do? They were thinking of putting the tax structure like on this, like the school taxes figure. This is for business property, not your home. But those things are going up too. And a lot of people are having to sell their business because they can't pay their taxes. Mm-hmm. Then they can rent it out, so they have to pay whatever rent they're at the mercy of. And the workers, the staff, they're still getting paid minimum wage, and everyone's smiling except the citizens that have been here for a long time and made these renovations and put their blood, sweat, and tears into these businesses and were so proud of what they had accomplished. They're all having to sell out now. And I don't want Main Street to start looking like a mall, you know?
No, I understand exactly what you're talking about. I'm a small-town kid myself. But very often when large blocks of money decide they want to take over an area, the first thing they do is they get the cooperation of the local politicians. And the politicians will change the rules or raise the taxes, specifically designed to bring down the current existing economic order so that a whole new one can be established that they hope will provide higher taxes. One of the major abuses we've seen recently for eminent domain is originally eminent domain was they could take your home if they needed to put a freeway there, but we're seeing eminent domain being used to take private homes that are on very large pieces of land because the government wants it redeveloped as a shopping mall because that will generate more revenue. And it's another aspect of fascism, which is corporate wealth and government power aligned together against the general population. And it's tragic to see it happen, and I understand exactly what you're going through. I've witnessed some very nice, funky places that I used to know long ago, and today it's all plastic fantastic. And it's lost its character. I mean, the United States has lost its regional personality in terms of its various stores and everything. I mean, that's what made the original Route 66 so amazing. Everywhere you went, it was all different character, different artwork, different personality, different humor. Today, it's all the same. Golden arches and gas station signs, and it's the same, you know, mile after, which is why driving Route 66 isn't the popular pastime it was when I was a kid.
Do you know anything about State Representative Kyle Biederman? Because that's who everyone of these businessmen met with last Thursday.
I've heard of him, but I really don't know that much about him. And in any event, we're out of time on this segment.
Yeah.
So, Sherry, I wish you luck.
Thank you.
I deeply empathize with what you're going through. And we're going to take a break for commercials and come back with another phone call. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're going to take another phone call from Dan right here in Hawaii. Aloha, brah. What's up?
Hi, Michael. Thank you. I worked on, when I was a kid, I worked on the Trans-Alaskan Pipeline.
Okay.
And at Pump 2 and then later down in Valdez. And we had worked for Chicago Bridge and Iron. We had a geologist and his crew that came down, and they had dinner with us at Pump 2. And he said that they didn't have to go up to the top to get oil. He said the whole top of Alaska and then moving all the way east across Canada was solid oil, and wherever they put a hole, they found oil.
Okay, and the reason that they were running the pipeline all the way up to the top was?
I guess I wasn't smart enough to ask him.
Ah, okay.
Maybe it was political. I don't know. But as far as I'm concerned, the top of Alaska is oil and lots of it.
Well, again, the issue for the United States government and the reason for these wars isn't the oil itself, but what currency it's traded for around the world.
Apparently not. And one more thing. I knew a doctor in Walla Walla that had land in Malheur County. And we know what's going on or went on out there. Okay. In addition to what they're looking for out there, which is uranium, the doctor said that there was a tremendous amount of gold in those sands and dirt out there.
Mm-hmm.
Tremendous amount. And that he actually owned some land there with some other friends, but they couldn't get the gold out because they couldn't get water to it.
Yes.
So there's gold there, too.
Well, I'm not surprised. There's a lot of gold all over the place. It always comes down to that unit cost of extraction, which is if it costs more than the value of an ounce of gold to extract 1 ounce of gold, it's not a profitable business and it's going to be shut down. Now, the issue with the water is Claire and I spent a lot of time when we lived in Southern California going up to the old gold mines in the San Gabriel Mountains and out in the Mojave, and very often we would take neighborhood kids and we'd take them gold panning and all the rest of it. But even to this day, you can see the scars that were left by some, frankly, very irresponsible methods of hydraulic mining.
Yeah.
And so there are strict...
I placed the mind up there myself.
Yeah. There's strict laws on that one. All right, well, Dan, it sounds like you had a lot of fun. And thank you for the information.
I did. Thank you, sir.
All right. Going to switch over here to Sam in Texas. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yes, Michael. First time I've ever talked to you. I've listened to you a bunch of times. I'll try to make it quick as I can. About this property tax issue. I don't know if you've heard of it, but I understand on the 18th of July, Greg Abbott, the governor of Texas, is supposed to have a special meeting with the legislature and calling for property tax reform. Now, you can probably understand what the result of reform might be. Might get something worse than what we have.
I think so.
But some people down here I've got associated with, they're wanting a bunch of people to be in Austin on the 18th to pass out flyers at the state capitol up there in Austin on that day, July 18th. So, and we'd rather just see it abolished.
Well, I think most people would. I mean, if you look at how much of the people's wealth is taken by government and how badly they misuse it, it's a raw deal. And like I keep saying, we need a cash for clunkers bill for the government itself. Take our old, bloated, very expensive government over to the junkyard, put it in the machine, crunch it up to a little rusty metal coffee table, and then we all get a check for $20,000 to buy a new, smaller, much more efficient government. I think that's an idea whose time has come. But the hard reality is that because of that private central banking debt creation machine, all of our governments are in serious trouble. And when they get into trouble, what do? They take more away from you, the American people. All right, Sam, got to let you go. Got to take another break for commercials, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're going to take another phone call, then get back to the news. Jesse in Ohio, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind today?
Hey, Mike. Hey, I was thinking about something you said the other day with the new Space Corps or whatever they're going to call it.
Yes.
I figured they got to have a way to protect the pedophile camp up on Mars, don't they?
I guess so. Don't want any other civilizations cutting in on their action, I guess.
Right. Hey, but something you were talking about Friday with the caller that was talking about jobs.
Yes.
I was going to call in then, but I didn't get a chance. But if your listeners listening out there need jobs, get Craigslist, man. I live outside of Cincinnati and Dayton. I live about in the middle. So I've got 2 cities here within my area. And, Mike, if I lost my job today, I could have another job tomorrow. I mean, they're everywhere. Like, there's literally probably right now over 1,000 jobs posted on Craigslist to be had.
Well,
just in my area.
Okay, there's a couple of things. First of all, I hope you're right. I certainly hope you're right. But one thing I've noticed in the past is that ads for jobs rarely get taken down when the jobs are filled. And so you may see a huge number of job ads at Craigslist or the local job board or the newspaper. The jobs may already be gone. And that can be a little bit deceptive there. It's like driving down the road and you're seeing a sign for a yard sale, and you drive on up and it finds out the yard sale was a week ago and nobody bothered to take down the signs. The same thing, unfortunately, is true of the job ads. So the actual number of jobs that are out there is not always accurately reflected by the number of ads that are there. In fact, some of the professional job agencies will deliberately leave obsolete ads up there just to make it look like they've got more for people to work with.
Oh, yeah, I understand that. But, I mean, just by the recent ones, the ones posted in the last couple of days, I'm a painter. I paint houses.
Okay.
And it doesn't, I think at the most it's taken me a week to find a job from one to the other.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all it is sending out a couple of emails. You might send 10 or 15 of them out, and more than likely a job within the week. But it's for all kinds of stuff. I mean, I would recommend people, if they're looking, to go on there and look. And, you know, they're not always good jobs. I've worked them, too, where I don't get paid at the end of the week and you don't go back. I mean, that stuff's out there as well. But there is other than, like, trying to find your conventional jobs, walking into a brick-and-mortar store, something like that. There's other stuff out there people need to be aware of to try.
Well, again, I'm just going from the stats that we're getting. I mean, even Fox News the other day was admitting that roughly half of all able-bodied Americans, that is all Americans who are willing and able to work, legally allowed to work, almost half have been unable to find jobs for months, if not years. And it's certainly something we see around here a lot. We've got a huge homeless population we're trying to deal with. And in many cases, these are people who were lured out here for a job, and then because our tourism has been driven to the edge of collapse by TSA, the companies they're working for go out of business. They don't have the money to get off this island, and inevitably they become homeless. Or they simply literally abandon all of their worldly possessions by the side of the road, and they fly on out of here.
Right. That's sad.
Okay?
But that was about all I wanted to cover, Mike.
All right.
Have a good day. No fear.
All right, thanks an awful. We're gonna. Okay, we had some trouble on the phone line there at the end. We're going to let you go here and get on back to the news here. We were talking about what's going up over in Mosul, where the Prime Minister of Iraq has now basically said Mosul has been liberated from ISIS. There may be one or two still lurking in the shadows, but they're going on in now to clean out the remnants and start the demining operation. And apparently they are discovering, as they examine and bury the dead bodies, they're finding out just how many of these so-called ISIS extremists are not from Iraq. They're hired foreign mercenaries. Now, encouraged by their recent victories against ISIS, Iraq is now striking a huge military deal with Russia, because Russia has brought their weapons into Syria and Iraq, and everybody's seeing what a great job they're doing. A lot of bang for the buck there. And so Iraq is going to start buying a lot of Russian-made military equipment in the near future. And I'm sure the American defense contractors are out there saying, you can't do that. We killed Saddam, so you'd have to buy your bombs and bullets from us. And the government of Iraq is saying, your stuff doesn't work here. All right, 2 more phone calls. Alex in Florida, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Michael. Last week a caller called about jobs and that you have to move to them. I think he was in Nebraska, saying you have to move if you want the job. There's plenty of jobs. There's only slavery jobs, working for the mega corporations that are basically the ones that want to rule the world, 2 or 3 of them, maybe 4.
I'm very suspicious of these people calling on in and saying, oh, there's plenty of jobs. There's no mass unemployment. Really, there's plenty of jobs. It doesn't actually pass the smell test, to be very brutally honest about it.
That's right. And we need to keep in mind we're working for a fraudulent system.
Yes.
The currency of the United States is a fraudulent system that needs to be overthrown, and we should protest working for what they're paying us, especially the corporations that basically have thrived on this system by keeping us all in slavery and paying us with fake money. And it just sucks.
Well, I'm concerned that this nation is reaching the breaking point. Too many people are going hungry. Too many people are going homeless. Hardly anybody I know has any confidence that life is going to get better in the future. Everybody is looking into what is clearly a deteriorating situation, and at some point there's going to be a breaking point, and things are going to get really, really ugly. And I'd like to find a way to avoid that, but unfortunately nobody with lots of money and power is listening to me these days.
Well, hopefully it will be bad for a while, but it will be better ultimately. We have to overthrow the system. It's a system of slavery. You know that.
I don't want to use the word overthrow. I don't want to use the word overthrow. But again, I see as the most likely outcome of what we're going through right now is a Soviet-style collapse of the central federal government and the private central banking system. And we all need to be ready. First of all, it's going to be a rough few months while we form a new country here. And rule number 1 has got to be no more private central banks. We demand an honest monetary system, or the revolution is still on, or the collapse is still on, or whatever is still on. But that's rule number 1. No more private central banking. It's also rule number 2 and rule number 3.
That's right. Hey, is there anything to Trump's son colluding with Russia? I'm asking your opinion. I want good advice on that.
Well,
is there anything on that?
Are you talking about the son-in-law or the son? The son appears to have contacted a Russian attorney over Russian adoption laws, like maybe they wanted to adopt a child from Russia. I'm not sure. It's the fashion trend. I have adopted children from all over the world. Jared Kushner, I think there's a real problem there. Because he was in serious financial straits following the collapse of his hedge fund, and apparently he was offered a very generous large loan from a Russian bank, which obviously would come with strings attached to it. So I think there's actually an issue there. But when you compare these to the scale of corruption we saw at the Clinton Foundation, the potential espionage, and the rest of it, they pale in comparison. And by the way, do you remember when James Comey, during his press conference on Hillary's email, went down the list of Title 18 felony violations that she committed and then said, we're not recommending charges because she didn't mean to do wrong? Well, guess what? Comey doesn't get to use that same excuse, even though it doesn't legally apply, because he intended to leak these memos to his friend with the intention that they would be forwarded to the corporate media. And they contain classified information. That's Title 18 violation right there. We need to start seeing some of these people held to the letter of the law, because a society in which the law only applies to ordinary citizens cannot possibly endure.
Yeah, I think it's going to take place. I think they're going indict a bunch of them altogether. I hope they are.
I
mean,
want to see
Susan
it.
Rice,
I do
Rivero.
want to see it. And I'll be very honest. There's a little bit of a personal vindictiveness coming here because these people destroyed Claire and my life 23, 24 years ago over that Vince Foster affair. Just destroyed the career that I had worked for. And yes, I got it back a little bit later on. But we've never had the life that we should have had. And, yeah, I'm a little angry that they got away with that. Not just with me. Look at all the other thousands of people whose lives have been utterly destroyed by these very vicious criminals. It is time for them to be held to account.
Yeah, I must say, Michael, I'm a songwriter. I used to be able to take my songs to the local radio stations, and they would play them.
Yep.
And then when Clinton consolidated the media, the DJ told me, I can't play. I can think that you're Elton John or Paul McCartney, and I'm not allowed to play you anymore.
Yeah.
And
no, there was a ban list. There was a ban list. Any of the songs that talk about peace and love and joy, the stuff from the 60s that actually had some heart to it was all banned. And all we got was this modern approximation of pop music with meaningless lyrics and lots of product placement.
Yeah, that right there was one of the first steps into corporatism that our government actually allowed to have happen. And it sucks. Today it sucks.
Yes.
That you have to go to the guy in the Eiffel Tower if he's home, if you can get there, and if he's not so corrupted to see if maybe he would be interested in playing one of your songs or movies or whatever. It's a scam. We can't compete against people that can print money all day.
Yeah, and there's a lot of fraud going on in the music industry where all these bands, the problem with these electronic sales, downloadable files, you don't know if you got an accurate count or not. And we know that's happened to Claire's Christmas album, because every Christmas we'll get emails from people saying, we bought your album, we love it. We never see a check. We've never seen a check.
Yeah.
So we're being cheated. It's a nation of the scammers, by the scammers, and for the scammers.
I know. It's almost like, where's all you have no reason to really want to come out with something that's really creative and new or intuitive. You don't have any motivation to do it because there are thieves everywhere.
Oh, yeah. Well, when I worked
more powerful than us.
When I worked in Hollywood, there was a saying we had, which was, being in Hollywood is like being in a bowl of granola. If it ain't fruits and nuts, it's going to be flakes. But I think an even better quote came from Alex Baldwin, who said, if you want money, go work on Wall Street. If you want lots and lots of free sex, go into the fashion industry. Okay? And but if you want all of that, if you want power, go into politics. But if you want all of that, wealth, power, and lots of free sex, go into the film industry. And it's just one big poison cocktail stirred with the swizzle stick of, hey, we're doing something creative. And my personal experience in Hollywood, everybody you're going to meet is either a saint or a shark. And it's amazing the gap that's in between. I look at, for example, Renee Valente. I've talked about her before. She was a saint. And then I saw some others who were just absolute vicious sharks. And it is an interesting sociology. Anyway, Alex, I'm going to let you go here, and we're going to switch over.
Bye.
Bye-bye. We're going to switch over to TJ in Philadelphia. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. Calling here from Philadelphia. I just wanted to let you know you were spot on with your analysis of the Earth's magnetic field. I'm a geologist. Got my undergraduate degree from Colgate.
Okay.
What's fascinating is that we don't really understand why the dipole moment of the planet, the magnetic field, switches with a regular periodicity. And I have my own theory about that. It's not by any means attached to geology, certainly not accepted among the geology field. But it's a fascinating area, and we're not certain how long it takes between one magnetic field and actually flipping to another. How long the period is where we're absent magnetic field and subject to ionizing radiation.
Yeah, and I remember all those questions from when I was hanging out at NASA, and we don't know. I mean, the reality is mankind has only had the scientific means to look into these questions for a little over 100 years. Before that, yes, they were counting sunspots with telescopes and things, but it's all very new science in the context of how long humans have been on this planet. And we're only just now starting to figure some of this stuff out. And obviously, an Earth without a magnetic field, there's going to be a problem. But the issue is the Earth has had an absence of a magnetic field in the past, and life did not go extinct. So there may be radioactive, maybe radiation effects. There may even be enhanced mutation. We all talk about the great extinctions.
Or evolution, exactly.
Yeah, and it may be that we're seeing more evolution accelerate during these periods where more radiation is reaching the Earth, like the Cambrian explosion, for example.
Exactly. In 1983, I was in your area. I was on the Big Island of Hawaii with USGS, staying in Volcano National Park. At a cabin about a half mile away from the rift at Kilauea Iki, the rift eruption, which had recently started up after 20 years of quietus, of absolute quiet. And that was a fascinating experience. 10 guys, 2 women, and not much to do while you're stuck in a cabin.
Yeah. Well, you know, at least you got out of there, and if I'm not mistaken, that cabin isn't there anymore.
Yeah, there have been a lot of changes going on. I'm surprised that Uncle Billy's Hilo Bay Motel is there after we stayed there, too.
Well, Hilo Bay is quite far away from the main lava flow. I mean,
right.
Basically,
I was talking about what we did to the motel.
Oh, I see. Okay, well, yeah, that's another story, and that does happen a lot here in Hawaii as well. All right, well, listen, TJ, I'm going to have to let you go. We got to take another break for commercials, and we'll be back after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, and boy, I'm looking at some of the stuff that's coming on, and apparently Senator Schumer wants the FDA to crack down on raw cacao powder, chocolate. They want to regulate chocolate now. It's amazing. Apparently, Lindsey Graham is also on the warpath against Donald Trump, or rather, actually, against Rex Tillerson for even daring to suggest that Russia might have a workable plan in Syria. You just can't do that. Meanwhile, over in Korea, the U.S. is running these drills, flying these bombers all over. North Korea is basically saying this is intentional provocation, and yes, it is. Now, supposedly, Trump and China have agreed to joint military exercises over the North Korea threat. Remembering that the only one who's out there doing any threatening is the United States. North Korea is trying to build itself a defense against invasion, which makes a lot of sense. All right, another phone call. Dan in Boston. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Thanks for taking the call. I just called about the economy. From what I've noticed, in 2008 when everything crashed, it's recovered a little bit, but the wages have stayed at the same level as they were in 2008, and you've had inflation. And there are jobs, but there's just not no middle class livable wage jobs. It's just from what I see, mostly scam. If you go on Craigslist, half the jobs are kind of scams or.
Yeah, I got an email from somebody about that. First of all, let's get back to your idea about the wage scales. The idea there are plenty of jobs. What people need are the jobs that paid them what they were making before when they made their commitments to their mortgage and car payments and their insurance payments. And once they're committed to all of those debts, if they're forced to take a lower paying job, they're going to be in trouble. They're going to be bankrupt. And so saying that, hey, there's plenty of jobs out there if you want to carry hamburgers, to somebody who's actually been used to working as an engineer and making that kind of money, that isn't a workable solution. And it's not just having jobs, it's having high-paying jobs. And I got a couple of emails on this very issue where even though, now I don't know how it is in every state. I know in California, it is against the law for an employment agency to charge applicants any money. The fees are always paid by the employer, but apparently there are scams cropping up all across America, phony job title agencies who are charging application fees or assistance fees, and it's just another money-making operation. So you do have to be very, very careful out there.
Yeah, and a lot of them just flat out lie to you about what you're going to make. I mean, car sales jobs have always kind of been like that, but you just see that now with even normal kind of office jobs and stuff like that.
Well, any sales job that's on commission, you're not going to make any money in this economy. I mean, everyone's talking Carmageddon. The drive-in movie theater at the bottom of the hill, it hasn't been a theater for years. They've now got it fenced off. It's an overflow lot for the local car dealerships. There's row on row of new car down there. Nobody has the money to buy them. We'll be back after station identification. Thank you for the call, Dan. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Now, Nikki Haley is back up at the United Nations just frothing at the mouth. We cannot trust Russia, and we won't ever trust Russia. And just everyone knows that Russia interfered with the U.S. elections, and everyone knows that Russia stole Crimea. And again, it's a regurgitation of the lies they've been saying all along. Because, again, Nikki Haley is in the same position as all the other politicians and corporate media talking heads. She can't stand up and say, you caught us, we were lying. We lied about Saddam's nuclear weapons. We lied about Assad gassing his own people. And, yes, we're lying about Russia stealing Crimea and hacking the election. At this point, judging by the reactions that we're seeing from other members of the Security Council, other members of the G20, I think most people have pretty much reached the point where they don't want to go along with this nonsense anymore, even out of a sense of diplomatic politeness. Everybody knows it's all a big steaming pile of USDA choice bovine excrement. And you can almost get a sense of desperation coming out of the warmongers, like John McCain and Lindsey Graham and Nikki Haley. They don't know how to push this thing forward. Nobody is buying the myth that Russia's this horrible, evil villain that must be destroyed, or that Assad is an evil villain that has to be destroyed. We have been down this road too many times. We have been made fools of by our own government way too many times to ever do that again. And you can almost smell the panic and the desperation to try and get something major going before the economy collapses. Because if the economy collapses, let me rephrase that, when the economy collapses, which some top experts are saying is likely to happen before the end of the year, and they don't have a war to blame it on, we, the American people, are going to stand up and point the finger of blame where it richly deserves to go. Wall Street corruption, the private central bank, and politicians who thought it was their job to help the money junkies rather than the American people. And so at this point, I'd be going long on tar and feathers if I were you. Now, the meeting between Trump and Putin has sent the usual liberal celebrities into a full-on meltdown. How could he meet with Vladimir Putin, the son of Darth Vader? I got a clue for you guys. The president meeting Putin goes with the job, especially at the G20. It's kind of expected. And I think a lot of these liberal crybabies are out there striving to sort of recover some sense of relevance to the current American society. And all they're doing is behaving like children. And let's see. Here we go. We're going to go ahead and take another phone call. Mark in North Carolina. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, how you doing, Mike? Mike, a couple of things. One is John McCain and Lindsey Graham. These guys, to me, ought to be arrested as for either treason or sedition, because they were involved in arming these so-called rebels, which were really terrorists. They even got pictures McCain with a bunch of them. This has been around for a while, and they did the same thing in Libya, and they also tried to put the Muslim Brotherhood into Egypt, but General Azizi wasn't going to go along with that. They actually tried to, almost force Azizi to take the Muslim Brotherhood back in, but they didn't. These guys are out and out evil. I think McCain is not just a psychopath. I think the man is out. So is Graham. I think these two are out and out evil. And you take somebody like Nikki Haley, she's just dumb. The woman does not belong in there. Now, the problem I see with Trump is this. He seems to be well-meaning and seems to have some decent people working with him. Now, Tillerson seems to have some kind of common sense, at least. The problem is he's got so many different types of people in his cabinet and in his government that undermine him.
Yes.
He wants to do something, and they right away say, no, Haley is a perfect example. Get her out. What is she doing in there? Get rid of McMaster. Get rid of Kushner. Get rid of some of these people. They're the ones that are bringing you down and making it tough on you. They're just, I expected he was going to be as tough as he sounded when he ran for president. I didn't realize he was going to just be, all over the place and let these people take advantage of him. And that's what's happening.
That is what's happening.
He's got to get tough. He's got to lower the hammer.
Like I said, he comes out of the world of business, but in the world of politics, he came into the White House as dangerously naive as Jimmy Carter did. And he just doesn't know how to deal with it yet. But he's learning, but he does have to get tough.
I hope he's learning because I don't know if I see a sign of it. Because again, like I said, if what he really should do is call McCain and Graham and people like that on the carpet and say, look, go to the American people, not just tweeting. Go directly to the American people and say, do you want World War III? Do you want nuclear war with a country that's not even really our enemy anymore? One thing when we had the Soviet Union, I'm not even sure how terrible the Soviet Union was anymore. But they certainly were not like the Russia of today, which is a very decent, good country.
Yes,
people actually like Americans. They're very similar to Americans in their lifestyle and in their way of thinking and all that. And there's no reason. I trust them way more than EU, any of these EU countries, including England. I certainly trust them more than Israel. And I certainly trust them more than the Saudis. I mean, this is ridiculous. And he's also got to start looking at Iran. I have mixed feelings about Iran. I don't think they are a theocracy, but they're not a theocracy the way Saudi Arabia is a theocracy. There's a lot more freedom there. There's even a certain amount of dissent. I even saw a poll they took where they actually went around asking whether women should be complied to wear, let's say, hijabs or not. This is in Iran today.
Yes.
Now, it was so terrible, if they tried that in Saudi Arabia, they'd probably be beheaded. And these women are required to wear those beekeeper suits,
Yeah.
So, I mean, Trump got to get it together because Saudi Arabia, Iran is not the major purveyor of terrorism. Saudi Arabia, and I hate to say it, Israel to a degree is also.
Oh, absolutely, no question about it. I mean, there was just a report came out in the British government that said that as far as the terrorists operating in Britain, they're being funded by Saudi Arabia, not Iran.
And I think people got to start taking a look at Israel and Saudi Arabia. I don't know if I ever told you. I think I told you one time that I was born Jewish, but I really don't know much about the Jewish religion because I never really practiced, I didn't marry. I married both of my ex-wives. Neither of them are Jewish. My kids weren't raised as Jews. They were raised as, but still, I was born Jewish. I have a little bit of knowledge. But the thing is this. I'm wondering, I'm trying to find out people who do know more about Judaism and Islam, both. Is there some kind of a connection between certain parts of Judaism and certain parts of Islam, mostly the Wahhabi form of Islam, and maybe certain sects of the Orthodox?
Well, and inevitably there's going to be because all of those religions go all the way back to Abraham, who's credited with being the first monotheist, although obviously Amenhotep IV preempted him on that one. But I mean, Judaism was a monotheistic religion. Then this rabbi comes along and splits off Christianity, and then a little further along, you have Muhammad and splits off Islam. Joshua.
Oh, you mean Jesus?
Well, Jesus is a mistranslation. And then you had Muhammad, and Islam splits off, and then they split into the Sunni and the Shiite. But they all share that one common root in Abraham's monotheism, and you would think that there would be a common meeting ground for peace on that one point alone.
But the reason I say Saudi Arabia and Israel, first of all, when you see the way they're working together with each other now, it's it defies what people. A lot of people are surprised, can't believe. But I'm wondering, you've got the Talmud and you've got the Hadith. Both seem to be very similar. The Hadith seems to explain at least the what do you call it again?
Well, I think you're putting too much importance on religion. I think what's driving Israel and Saudi Arabia is more along the lines of territorial expansion, increase in wealth and power, and the religion is just set dressing to try and convince their respective populations that what is being done by the rulers is the will of the gods.
But if that was the case, why wouldn't the Israelis form an alliance, for instance, let's say with Iran, or even with Turkey or something? Why is it Saudi Arabia? I'm thinking of the Quran. The Hadith actually explains the Quran, and I think the Talmud supposed to explain the Bible or the Old Testament or the Torah. That's why I'm wondering whether that's why I'm saying whether there isn't some kind of a religious connection between the Saudi royal family and the certain forms of Judaism. I even noticed that I've seen some comments too on various parts of the internet. Of course, a lot of that doesn't mean anything either, but sometimes it does. That there is a connection. That there, that even that the Saudis are kind of really the Saudi royal family is really a Jewish tribe. And it's something odd that I did find out though, that in Israel they have a draft, obviously for Jews, but neither Muslims or Christian Arabs are subject to that draft. However, you know who are subject to that draft? The Bedouins, the Bedouin tribesmen, who are really Muslims, as far as I know. And the Bedouins are very much related. As a matter of fact, the Saudis really are.
Okay, Mark, you're kind of going off into this very convoluted mapping of linkages. But again, my read of the situation is that the leadership of Israel and the leadership of Saudi Arabia are primarily being driven by ambition for power and greed and territory. They're certainly going to use the trappings of religion to get their populations to go along with it. But I think you're seeing more control and influence from the religious side than I think can be justified to be there. Anyway, Mark, I need to let you go. I got a bunch of news to get through here. We've had a lot of calls on the line today, which is good. I enjoy the phone calls. We're going to do a shout-out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network. And as long as we're talking about Iran, Iran is questioning, or actually they're throwing doubt on the sincerity of the United States in this current ceasefire deal. And this article came on out before the revelation that Israel may already be thinking that the deal does not apply to them, even though the original report on this Russian-Syrian deal indicated that Jordan and Israel were on board with all of this. Now, obviously, for anybody who doesn't want the ceasefire to work, all they got to do is go on in and run an attack. So if Israel can fly into that part of Syria and start dropping bombs, the ceasefire will be over. For peace to happen, everybody has to want peace. But it only takes one maniac with a bomb or a gun to keep the fighting going. And we certainly have that with Israel. We have it with the United States, which is delivering hundreds of trucks of weapons to the PKK terrorists even now. They don't want this war to be over. They still want Assad out. They want U.S. control over Syria. I think Putin was trying to send a very firm message that the U.S. will not be allowed to expand any further into Syria. And even years ago, Putin was saying, if the U.S. pushes into places it is not welcome, Russia will turn these into a war of attrition, just like Vietnam, and just wear the United States down to collapse. And folks, we're close enough to that as it is. Russia has the resources to outlast the United States in a war of attrition. So, another article over at Gold Core saying that China and Russia alliance deepens against American overstretch. The rest of the world is waking up to the fact that the U.S. government is step by step trying to basically take over the entire world. That General Wesley Clark was not smoking opium when he came out with that list of all the nations the U.S. was going to invade and regime change, ending with Iran in 2008. So at some point, we're going to see the rest of the world harden their resistance against any further encroachments by the United States. I really don't want to see these wars go any further. I do not think the United States can win a conventional war against Russia, China, and whoever else aligns with them. And that means we seriously are risking nuclear weapons. And that's a bad thing. Now, Russia is speeding up production of their latest missile, the S-500. And apparently mass production is expected to start late next year or early 2019, and it will be deployed as far as 2020. And apparently this rocket can destroy targets at altitudes up to 100 kilometers above the Earth. It is a very potent, capable missile. Now, over in Iran, they're going to start domestically producing their copy, if you will, of the Russian surface-to-air missile, the C-300. And they're expecting to have that deployed sometime next year as well. Everybody is arming up. They know the U.S. is gunning for them. And, of course, I'm sure that Nikki Haley will be up at the United Nations saying, how dare Iran make missiles to defend themselves from us? What's wrong with those people? They don't understand. Our manifest destiny is to rule the world. You can't even run this country. And you think you're ready to run the entire world? You would have an easier sale of that if this country looked like it was running smoothly, but it isn't. It's in serious trouble, and everybody can see that. Down in Yemen, the cholera cases passed 300,000. According to the International Committee of the Red Cross, at least 1,700 people have died from it. I have to tell you, this is looking more and more like a biological warfare attack and less like a natural outbreak. That's just my opinion, of course. We're going to go back to the telephones now. Ramsey in Canada, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello?
You're on the air.
Hello, sir. How are you? Thank you for taking my call. You see, sir, I just want to say something regarding the last caller. He said that Israel and Saudi Arabia are buddies and friends. Actually, sir, it's not true. Like, Israel is controlling Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is a puppet of Israel through the United States. So he thinks that they're like a man and a woman happily married. No, like, the guy's completely wrong. Like Saudi Arabia is a puppet of Israel. So, and see, so regarding what he said about the religion or whatever he said, Saudi Arabia is based on a system called the Wahhabi system, which started in the 17th century. So the Hadith or the religion came way before that Wahhabi system started.
Okay, well, let's back up here a little bit. We know, of course, that there was a change in leadership in Saudi Arabia that not everybody in Saudi Arabia is happy about. The new Crown Prince bin Salman is very much aligned with Western and Israeli interests. Part of that may be the fact that Donald Trump did authorize this massive weapons sale of modern weapons to Saudi Arabia, although I'm still hearing the Congress may move to try and limit or block that one. But again, we know that Israel is a master of taking control of other countries' governments covertly, clandestinely, and running those countries for their own benefit. They've certainly done it here. And the fact that nobody even mentions that at the same time they're screaming about Russia tampering with our politics shows you just how great their influence is. Okay?
And yeah, thanks.
All right, we're going to let you go then. Thanks an awful lot for the phone call. Coming up on another commercial break here. Now, there was a little bit of a kerfuffle, if you will, where up in Hungary, their prime minister has gone on a campaign to try and keep George Soros and his various non-governmental organizations out of Hungary, because he sees them as the harbinger of tampering with his country. And so Israel's foreign minister came on out and said, well, you're being an anti-Semite if you're opposed to George Soros. And apparently Netanyahu said, no, we're going to retract the criticism of anti-Semitism, and we're going to slam on George Soros, because George Soros is constantly trying to undermine Israel's government as well. And that's our job. We'll be back after these few words. Hello, hi, America. Welcome back to the show. Now, Russia Insider is reporting, and this is confirmation of what one of the callers mentioned earlier in the show. Apparently, Israel is having second thoughts about this Russia-U.S. brokered ceasefire, and Israel wants Russia to basically get out of it and leave only the U.S. forces there monitoring the ceasefire. Jordan did go along with the deal. They're happy to get out of the mess. They've really had enough of Syria for one time. But Israel is out there just saying, absolutely not. This should only be the U.S. in there. That's not going to fly very well. Meanwhile, over at The Intercept, they're reporting an interesting development. This gets back to the situation in Qatar and the suddenness, like out of nowhere, that all of this blew up. And apparently, the hardline approach from the White House followed a situation where Jared Kushner was refused a bailout loan from a Qatari investor. Apparently, Kushner was trying to secure a $500 million investment to shore up finances on their troubled property at 666 Fifth Avenue in New York City, the town home of the beast, if you will. And apparently, without outside intervention or some kind of a bailout, they're probably going to lose that property. It's going to be a $500 million loss, a little bit of an embarrassment there. So they were really after this Qatari investor, and the Qatari investor said, no, I don't want to, because it is in financial trouble, and Kushner's track record as a financial manager is not a good one. So he refused, and then all of a sudden, we're going to go after Qatar. Because didn't it seem surprising just how quickly this all came about, where Qatar went from being good friend, we've got military bases there, to, wow, they're sponsoring terrorism, we've got to do whatever. Running an extortion racket. Give Jared the $500 million and things will calm down. It's amazing. Now, as you know, there was a big stink last week where CNN literally threatened to publicly expose the individual they believed responsible for this silly GIF animation showing Donald Trump body-checking CNN at a wrestling event. And was funny. And CNN should have just shrugged and moved on, because it's had the banned in Boston effect. Everybody wants to see this thing and what all the fuss is about. And CNN essentially tried to blackmail the creator of the GIF into taking it down. As it turned out, they had the wrong guy. And now things are ramping up because a lot of ordinary Americans are starting to think CNN needs a taste of its own medicine, and they are starting to get the personal information of the on-air correspondents and prostitutes and make it public, and now they're very scared that something might happen to them. Well, CNN began this. They started this mess. And it was tacky for them to do that. So some of these anchors, on-air talent, they're feeling very vulnerable. And maybe they should. Now, there is a gentleman over in the Middle East, Abdul Karim. He's considered a top Al-Qaeda propagandist, and he was hired by CNN to do a documentary called Undercover in Syria. And, of course, it was very pro-West, pro-war, get rid of Assad, very, very much on the side of the U.S. agenda. And as a result, it won the prestigious Overseas Press Club Award and the Peabody Award. But these days, if you look about this documentary at CNN, they don't happen to mention the guy who actually made the film. And now he's going public and saying, CNN did hire me. And yes, I'm an al-Qaeda propagandist. And I made the documentary, and now they're trying to pretend that we don't exist. So I've had that happen to me a couple of times when I was in Hollywood. Getting on to the economic news, Reuters is reporting that Sears Holding is closing 8 of its namesake department stores and 35 of its Kmart locations, trying to get the store back in the black. I don't know if it's really going to help. We got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here, and we're talking about the economic news. Sam's Club is also sounding the warning of more layoffs to come there as well. We're on a slippery slope here. They're closing stores. They're laying people off. It's the wrong direction to be going. Somebody has to start bringing back the high-paying jobs for middle-class and working America so we can start pumping that money back into the economic system. Adam Smith was wrong, and John Nash was right. Let's go to the phones here. Yvonne in New York. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi. I actually called about Trump's Twitter, but just to touch on what you were saying about stores closing down, we just found out that our health insurance will no longer cover Rite Aid stores. Here in New York, we use the Rite Aid pharmacy, and when I called, they said you have to use CVS now, and when I called CVS, they were all ready. They said, oh, yeah, we were just informed that we'd be getting a lot of new customers now because Rite Aid is being dumped. So that's a little concerning to me that maybe now all these drugstores are going to shut down. But also, you were talking about Trump's Twitter, and you had said that you didn't think he was putting out the tweets, and so coincidentally, the RNC had just called and asked me for a donation, and I said that, I don't trust the RNC. I said if Donald Trump wants a donation, like I donated to him during the the campaign, I'd like to see him put out on his Twitter, a request, like a comment saying that he trusted the RNC. And she says to me, "Oh, honey, he doesn't do. That's not Trump tweeting. He doesn't do that. He's got better things to do." And I was like, "Oh wow, that's." And then Mike Rivero just said the same thing.
Well, okay, first of all, I want to clarify. What I actually said was that because of some contradictions that have appeared between what's in the Twitter stream and what Trump is actually saying, I'm saying that maybe Trump doesn't have time to do a lot of tweeting to his own Twitter stream, and maybe some part of the White House communications staff has been given the job of sort of bulking it up and keeping the traffic flowing at times when Trump himself is unavailable, and that may have been the reason for the slip-up. Now, as far as donating to the RNC, this is July, and they're already starting the fundraising and the campaign for the midterms next year. I would really love to see the United States have a law like so many other countries do. The political campaigns are constrained to a very specific period of time, 2 to 3 months before the actual election. And outside of that, the politicians are supposed to be working on their jobs for us instead of already fundraising and holding strategy meetings and already getting back into campaign mode. I would really like to see that. But technically, Donald Trump is now the head of the Republican Party. And so, yeah, whatever the DNC is doing is very much part of his job right now.
So you think that if I'm not going to donate to them because I'm not happy with him, but he would get. All right. So I know that during the campaign there was such a disconnect. So but I'm still not happy with
there
him.
Still may be. There may still be people high up in the RNC who are going to work to get Donald Trump replaced. In any event, I'm not donating. I'm very disappointed in Donald Trump. I'm glad I supported him because last year my goal was primarily keeping Hillary out of that White House, to take that away from her. And I'm feeling very good that we did that. But as far as Trump himself, I'm a little disappointed. He's doing a lot of things I agree with. Some of the things he's doing I definitely do not agree with, such as perpetuating these wars of conquest. That's a big disappointment for me.
Yeah, and then just one other thing. You keep talking about how McCain. You'll say how I don't know who voted for him, and every time you say that, I think about Cuomo, our governor. I feel the same way. I mean, I don't know any. I don't even know liberals who voted for him. I know liberals who don't hate him, but I'm hard pressed to find anyone who said, "Oh yeah, I voted for Cuomo." In fact, I knew some liberal-minded people that held back their vacation to vote against him. So I don't know how I don't know how he keeps winning. I think that, and I know people. Well, I don't know people, but my husband knows state troopers who compliments of the taxpayer. They're his personal bodyguards, right? Mm-hmm. And I think it was about a year and a half ago, before the email scandal about Hillary Clinton came out, or we hadn't heard anything about that. They were talking about Cuomo and he has like a chef girlfriend, and it was the weirdest thing. They said that he spends all day in his car getting driven around deleting emails. Isn't that funny? And then, and they said that he was despicable. They said he was so disgusting, and that nobody wanted the detail, that anybody that had the detail to, bodyguard him or whatever, hated it, or they considered it practically a punishment. They said even the girlfriend was so unbelievably obnoxious, and she's a TV personality. She seems so pleasant on TV. They said she's vile, absolutely disgusting. I thought that was pretty interesting.
Well, there are stories about President Reagan's wife. In public, she was very pleasant, private. Same thing with the Clintons. In fact, there have been a number of tell-all books written by the Clinton associates from back in the Arkansas days that should underscore the fact what you see on TV is a performance, an art piece. It's theater. It's not how they really are. And again, power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. People will get into these positions of wealth and power, and it will go to their head. Especially if they started out with a sociopathic personality to begin with, having that kind of wealth and power and the ability to get away with everything you want to get away with, that will go to your head. And it can result in some very unpleasant people.
If I know I don't want to take up too much of your time, but just something I thought about is that if the Federal Reserve gets destroyed and the dollar becomes worthless, I don't know what these people are going to do, because they're paying these bodyguards or whatever. They're paying them with cash, right? Mm-hmm. So if the people who protect you loathe you, right? I mean, I've heard stories, because the line of work my husband does, I've heard stories of like billionaires with security guards where they won't let them eat. There was this one wedding where the guy had to follow a woman around to protect the diamond on her necklace, and they were throwing food out. And when they tried to eat the food that was going into the garbage, the guy freaked out on them. And I was like, these are what would it take if all of a sudden the money system collapsed? These guys that are protecting you, they'll turn on you. They'll grab that necklace off your neck. And, I mean, how stupid to mistreat the people that are protecting you. I don't understand that, but that's how they are.
I don't either. And, of course, if they're in a position of dependency on you, they'll take a lot of abuse. And it almost seems like there's a part of the human character that responds to brutality with submissiveness. And this goes all the way back to that Stanford prison experiment and apply it to the real world. Now, when I've been a manager, I always treat my subordinates with respect, because you are dependent on them in a very real way. I understand you can't be both their manager and their friend, but you can be a respectful, kind manager. And that always seems the best policy to me. But again, some of the people, they've got so much money and so much power, their attitude is, go ahead, quit. There's plenty more where you came from.
But you know what, I'm sorry, I don't mean to keep babbling on, but the type of personality of the man that you have, you know what I mean? Like the personality of the person who's a bodyguard or a cop, these are not submissive type people. And if they have to take abuse, that's not smart. I mean, I know what you're saying, that they've done studies about, how it's good if you have, you know what I mean? But it's not, in my opinion, it's unwise. Because if you've got the type of a personality where you're drawn to police work. And that's who they have. They have taxpayer-funded police officers bodyguarding them. And, I mean, we all know what cops are like, right? These people do not like being abused. They don't like it. And the day is going to come, I tell you, when...
It could.
I don't know.
It could.
I think,
that may be
yeah.
what happened to Indira Gandhi. She was killed by her own protective detail. Maybe she just maltreated them and they said, oh, to heck with this one.
Yeah. Oh, no kidding. See, I didn't know that.
Okay?
Oh. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go and go to Rick in Arizona. Aloha, Rick. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, Mike, I just want to, a couple callers ago, you talked about Saudi Arabia. You know, there's 16 countries Israelis cannot enter. And there's one country, even if you're Jewish from Nebraska, you cannot enter, and that's Saudi Arabia.
Okay.
So there's a lot of disinformation flying around out there about Israel's little brothers, Saudi Arabia. There is no friendship there. I don't know where it's coming from, but that's a fact. And something else I was going to say. Oh, and Trump's ban of the 7 countries. Now, let's say you were born in Yemen and you live in Israel now.
Mm-hmm.
You cannot enter the United States. If you're Jewish in Israel, but you were born in Yemen, you cannot enter the United States. So
I'm not sure that's accurate because the travel ban is based on a country of origin of the flights. It doesn't say anything in there about any ethnic group.
Not according to the immigration lawyer in New York City.
Well,
so
let me do a little research on that because the whole big stink about this, the travel ban, was that it not mention any nationality or ethnicity, but simply say people traveling from these countries will be subjected to more scrutiny, which does.
Well, they're not going to tell you that on the news. Let
me go find out on that one because. Again, if the travel ban did in fact specifically say Yemenites are not allowed, then these many court decisions would probably have gone the other way in terms of blocking the travel ban. But again, under Title VIII, the president does have a right to arbitrarily declare certain groups of people are forbidden from immigrating to this country, and previous presidents have used it many, many times. It's only when it's Donald Trump against the New World Order that they're going to make a really big stink about that one.
Yeah, that's true. He can stop immigration based on national security, based on health risks. So when they fight him with these judges overturning his laws, that's crap.
It is.
Just for public consumption. He can stop it anytime he wants.
Okay, well, Rick, thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go here. We're coming up here toward the end of the show. Last commercial break here. Talking about the economic news, Illinois finally has approved its first budget in 2 years. They've been deadlocked since 2015. And apparently, Illinois, the entire state, is hovering at the edge of junk credit status. This is the first domino. It's downhill from here. Nobody is really thinking about how to save the economy. I really do think that Wall Street and all of the big politicians know the United States cannot be saved, and their agenda is to simply grab what they can and skedaddle for the border before it all comes apart. So lock up your silverware and your daughters and be on guard here. Now, we keep hearing about the cashless society. And there's a new option out there called the less cash society where transactions above a certain level will have to be on those plastic cards. Below a certain level, they're going to allow you to have a little bit of cash and use a little bit of cash. But Australia is now coming out with a new note, new $100 notes that have tracking chips in them. So as you go through turnstiles and checkpoints, the government will know where the money is and how much you've got in your pocket. Isn't that going to give you a warm and fuzzy feeling? Now, we were talking about the dying of America's middle class. Actually, it's being murdered. Throughout history, all tyrants will work to destroy the middle class because it is from the middle class that opposition to oligarchy always arises. That was true in the American Revolution, was true in the French Revolution, ultimately was true in the Russian Revolution, which is why the Soviet Union got rid of the middle class real quick. So we have this article in Blacklisted News. The number of Americans that cannot afford their own homes has more than doubled. Rents are going up. Mortgage interest is going up. Housing values are going down. A lot more people underwater. Another article coming out of government slaves working past 70. Americans can't seem to retire. It's just not there. The pension funds are in trouble. Social Security's in trouble. The only thing that people over 70 might see as a saving grace is there won't be any jobs for them. Nobody likes to hire old people. Now, as you know, we're in the middle of summer, and summer normally is a season where gasoline sales go through the roof because people go on out and they drive to other towns to visit friends and relatives, and they go on out to our national parks. And it hasn't happened this year. And Bank of America is out there saying, where's the driving season here? And the answer is very obvious. People don't have money for gratuitous driving. They don't have money for newer cars. Our national parks have been terror-proof to the point where they're just not all that enjoyable anymore. And as that earlier caller said, because of the plastic fantastic transition of our country, there's no more local character. So why drive 20 miles to see a shopping mall and a McDonald's when you've got exactly the same thing sitting already near you and no money to spend at either one anyway? So I'm not surprised driving season is very low this year. And that'll keep oil and gas prices down, because normally when demand goes up, price goes up. Like I said, people don't drive the original Route 66 the way they did when I was a kid. That was a big adventure. It's a grand way to get across the country, or at least from LA to Chicago. So down in the European Union, they have 7.2% of the world population, 23.8% of the gross domestic product, and 58% of world welfare spending. In other words, it's coming up on a breaking point. Europe, their population, their GDP, can no longer support the flood of refugees and migrants pouring in day by day by day. Another story coming out of Investment Watch blog. Up in Sweden, where there's this rape epidemic going on, almost half the victims are children. Thank you, George Soros. What a wonderful thing you've done to Europe and its people and its culture. All right, we're going to take a break for commercials. We'll be back with the last segment of our Monday program after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Last segment of our program on this Monday here, and I'm afraid cannot take any more calls at this point. Sorry for those who were holding. We're just going to let you go here. There's a very interesting program that ran on History Channel last night. It's Amelia Earhart, The New Evidence, and I put it on the DVR and I watched it. They make a very compelling case that Amelia Earhart and Fred Noonan survived the landing of their aircraft at one of the many atolls in the Pacific. They were captured by the Japanese, interred at Saipan, and then later on executed and buried there. Now, a lot of people have been making a lot of commentary about this one photo that was uncovered at the National Archives that seems to show Earhart, Noonan, and the remains of the aircraft on a dock at this island with this Japanese ship in the background towing the barge on which the remains of the Electra appear to be. The photo's a little fuzzy. But they have a lot of other information. Apparently in Malaysia, it's sort of like commonly known history that Amelia Earhart and Fred Noonan wound up there. And by the way, this idea that Earhart and Noonan wound up on Saipan is not new. It's one of the many theories about what happened that's been around for a lot of years. I remember about 5 years ago there was somebody who claimed when they were cleaning out Saipan following the U.S. invasion that they found some of Earhart's personal papers and a flight case locked in a safe in the office. Not too surprisingly, a lot of people who have alternative theories to what happened to Amelia Earhart are out there trying to attack this and say, I'm right, maybe we can have a wrestling event, let them sort that out. What really is controversial and new about this particular variation on the theme is the fact that they provide documentation, including this photo from the National Archives, that had been classified at one point, was accidentally declassified and misfiled, to basically say that the U.S. government knew the Japanese had Amelia Earhart and Fred Noonan and chose to just ignore it, to abandon them, rather than risk the Japanese realizing that the U.S. had already cracked their naval codes as war approached. And from my own work on the Pearl Harbor deception, I know how important that was. The fact that the U.S. had cracked these codes was one of the most highly guarded secrets, so highly guarded that, yes, they would let people get killed, they would let ships get sink, rather than risk somebody on the other side saying, oh, they've got to be reading our message traffic. So that's the part of the story that everybody says, oh, our government would never do anything like that. Yeah, afraid they would. Afraid they would. But they do make a compelling case, and I understand History Channel is still streaming it. They may do a rebroadcast. This one is definitely worth catching on the DVR and watching. Because it is very, very well done. I actually like a lot of what History Channel does these days. And I'm not just saying that because I was on there a while back. Those poor Londoners cannot get away from all these fires. Apparently, in East London, a building went up. They think the solar panels caught fire. There's the music. Time for me to get out of here. I got to do Jim Goddard's show, and then I got other things to do around here. We'll be back tomorrow here on the Republic Broadcasting Network. Until then, stay informed, stay skeptical, make good choices. Please stay tuned for John Stedmiller's program, Aloha America.